I'm sure you've heard of the reports last month about how India has overtaken Japan to become the fourth largest economy in the world. At least, that's what the top Indian officials claim will happen once consolidated GDP figures for 2025 come out. This claim came from Subramaniam, head of the Indian government's public policy think tank. He said that India is a $4 trillion economy that is larger than Japan, and will very soon surpass Germany to become the third largest economy in the world behind China and the US. But the thing is, he later had to correct himself by saying that he was referring to IMF estimates for 2026, so basically he got ahead of himself and celebrated a bit too early. It's a common pattern with these highly nationalistic Indians boasting and bragging about something that hasn't even happened yet. But in all fairness, even taking into account Modi's fudged figures and accounting tricks, such as including cow dung sales and changing base year calculations so that growth seems higher, India's GDP will surpass Japan's and Germany's very soon. I'm not blind to that fact. However, let's dive into how this is not something to boast by comparing the reality of both countries. First, and perhaps most obvious, is that India's GDP per capita is less than 3,000 US dollars, whereas Japan's GDP per capita is 34,000 US dollars. That's a staggering 11 times higher than India's per capita GDP. Looking at GNI, or gross national income, yields similar results. Basically, Japan is far more developed than India. There's no question about that. Some angry netizens will berate me and say, what about Mumbai? Well, alright, let's compare Mumbai to Tokyo. Metropolitan Tokyo has a whopping GDP of 2 trillion USD, whereas Mumbai has barely 300 billion USD. There's also no slums or open flowing sewage in Tokyo. What about poverty rates? Well, the World Bank provides a figure of 80% for Indians that live under 6 USD per day. India's extreme poverty rate has dropped from 25% to 5% in recent times, which is good news to hear. However, I am always skeptical about such methodologies used. For example, who defines what extreme poverty is? And how do we know Modi and the BJP didn't just make up numbers? But anyway, Japan's poverty rate, which is defined as those with incomes less than half the median household income, is around 15%. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that's a very modest definition of poverty. If we use the World Bank's 6 USD line, then Japan's poverty rate is between 2 to 3%, far lower than India's 80%. Let's be real, poor people in Japan live better lives than the middle class in India, and Japanese pets live far better lives than the Indian poor. And there's many problems that still plague India. Human development indicators, education levels, healthcare outcomes, economic inequality, access to public toilets, clean drinking water. All of these things are non-issues in Japan, but they're massive issues in India. Speaking of public toilets, let's talk about the difference in infrastructure and development between the two countries. Japan is well known for its futurism and technological prowess. As a fun example, look at their smart toilets that also function as bidets, blow dryers, seat warmers, deodorant, and in some cases acting as a smartphone. And in public, of course, you won't see these toilets, but you will have normal porcelain seats and separated stalls. Meanwhile, India seems to have a phobia of public toilets. Even though much of the population practices public defecation, which has spread to the immigrant communities in other countries as well, India has still not fixed the problem. Yeah, we all know about Modi's Clean Bharat campaign, but at the end of the day, you can't change the mindset and habits of the people. The land around the train tracks must be very fertile by now, seeing as it's prime defecation real estate. Speaking of trains, here's a map of Japan's high-speed rail network. And here's a map of India's high-speed rail network. In Japan, the train network is a strict, disciplined art, where timetables are meticulously kept and punctuality is key. In India, it's the complete opposite, utter chaos. In fact, after much negotiation and complaining about price from the Indian side, Japan agreed to provide India with 2 free high-speed trains, the E5 and E3 series Shinkansen bullet trains. This is for a high-speed rail track that is currently being built between Mumbai and Ahmedabad. Japan is building the high-speed railway because India doesn't have the technical expertise or knowledge. And surprise, 80% of the project is being funded by low-interest loans from the Japanese government. So even as Indian netizens brag about surpassing Japan's GDP, they still receive handouts from Japan as if they're on welfare. They can't afford a single high-speed rail network while boasting about overtaking the country with multiple high-speed railways. And people wonder why India is looked down on. And of course, the cities are much different. Japan is full of developed cities with beautifully clean roads, modern apartments, sleek views, no litter, and accessible toilets. India has dusty roads riddled with potholes, random cows lurking about, streets full of litter and sewage, exposed electrical wires, toilets that connect to nothing, and sprawling slums that highlight the poverty and inequality faced by most Indians. Civic sense is non-existent in India, but the total opposite is true for Japan. So many times we see Japanese clean up not only after themselves, but after other people. They bow their heads and speak with manners. They don't pester tourists and drag them into their stores. They respect costumes and people and the environment. All of these things are flipped upside down when I look at India. Seriously, it's a joke. One last thing I'd like to compare between these two nations is the makeup of the economy. Japan's GDP by sector is 1% agriculture, 27% industry, and 72% services. India's GDP by sector is 17% agriculture, 28% industry, and 55% services. These numbers make sense as India is still a developing country and has many rural farmers, while Japan is a developed service-based economy. India also has a large service sector, but it's mainly low-level call center and rudimentary tech support stuff. But the interesting thing is that their industry levels are about the same. Yet Japanese manufacturers are world famous. Think about the multiple car brands, the gaming brands, the hardware brands, the clothing brands. They have a strong presence in every sector of manufacturing. India, on the other hand, has none. The only thing I can think of is Tata Steel. And even though India produces more steel than Japan, Japan exports more steel than India, meaning other countries prefer good quality Japanese steel as opposed to crap Bharati steel. The poor quality, cheap products manifests itself in a lack of global and famous Indian brands. Make in India is not living up to the hype, no matter how loud the netizens rave and shout. So yes, India's total GDP might soon overtake Japan's on paper, but that's where the celebration should end. Because when you dig beneath the surface, the reality is embarrassing. This isn't a story of progress. It's a story of premature chest thumping built on shallow metrics, while the real markers of development like living standards, infrastructure, health, education, innovation, and basic dignity remain woefully behind. Bragging about raw GDP while 80% of your population lives under $6 a day is like bragging about owning a sports car while living in a leaking shack. Japan, with its smaller population, offers a vastly superior quality of life, global brand recognition, disciplined infrastructure, and a society that values order, cleanliness, and human decency. India, meanwhile, is still struggling to get its trains to run on time, build functioning toilets, and create global brands that anyone respects. Ousting Japan in nominal GDP rankings doesn't make India a developed country. It just means it has a massive population. And no matter how many slogans, manipulated statistics, or online trolls India throws at the world, it can't hide the truth. Development is about people's lives, not inflated numbers. Until India fixes its deep-rooted problems, surpassing Japan is just another hollow headline, nothing more. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.